Okay, how are we doing? Hey everyone, I can't see you all now that I'm sharing my screen. I can only see a few people, and I might even have to move that because I can't see the screen. So nice to see everyone. Thanks for coming. Shall we get started?
I think so. Go ahead,
Okay.
Diane. Why don't you kick things off?
Okay, yes. So yeah, thanks for coming. Julie and I are excited to be able to start these presentations for credit for prior learning. So a lot of you know who I am, Diane DeFreitas, curriculum chair for many years now, and also teach economics. And then Julie Lyons, which I know a lot of you know Julie as well, has come back to our campus. We've made her a credit for prior learning lead and a transfer center counselor. So yes, welcome.
I hope everyone will, we're going to run through these slides. They're really a guide to a conversation. So we really want everyone to feel free to, post questions in the chat, as we get through each slide, make sure you catch us before we kind of roll too far. So yeah, I mean, I hope everyone will see it as a conversation, like we're sitting around having a cup of coffee and learning about CPL and the opportunities ahead.
Yeah, so like she said, feel free to put questions in the chat. We got a couple of people monitoring the chat, and we would like to answer questions as we can along the way, plus at the end. So we'll make time for that. So this is what we're going to present. What is credit for prior learning? What's going on? Why we're doing this? State legislation updates. Expanding our credit for prior learning opportunities on campus, our progress to date, the faculty role, and then our next steps. I believe I will kick it to Julie to do the next couple slides.
Okay. So for some credit for prior learning, you're going to hear us use the acronym CPL, and it's not a new concept, but it is kind of rolling out in some different formats. So the concept behind CPL is it's college credit being awarded for college level skills that are gained outside a college classroom. So I know that for some is somewhat of a scary thought from our traditional, looking at college and awarding credit. So it can include everything from military training, industry certifications and training. And we're going to talk a lot more about these individual types of CPL as we go through the presentation. It can include state and federal government training, apprenticeships, internships, work-based learning. So a lot of new ways for students to gain college credit. Thank you. So separate from the types of experience students might bring to it, we have the types of assessment methods. So how are students actually going to get credit? Now, external exams, which many of us are familiar with, advanced placement, AP, international baccalaureate, IB, that's a little bit more unique. We have I think it's just 2 high schools in the area. If someone can chime in and tell me there's more, but I believe Fresno High and Yosemite High School do IB. And then CLEP, college level exam prep, that's becoming a little bit more prevalent, but we haven't seen much of that on our campus at all. Credit by exam, CBE. I hate to use that acronym along with CPL because then we're talking CPL, CBE. It just sounds like we're talking in letters. So credit by exam. We do some of that on our campus, but we'll talk more about that as we go through. Industry certifications. That's kind of a new one. Definitely for many of us, the thought of accepting industry certifications as an assessment method is very new and exciting. Military transcripts, that's the joint service transcript. and then learning portfolio. So that's definitely a new one for our campus to be looking at. Okay, so Diane mentioned, we're going to be talking about the state legislative updates, but there's really a more important reason we are looking at institutionalizing CPL on our campus, and that is the amazing impact it has on students. So if we're able to award a student, for anywhere, it could be 3 credits, it could be 12 credits. All of a sudden you have a student who, we're going to be able to increase their completion, their odds of completing a certificate and degree, go up significantly. They're saying the statistics show that it could be possibly twice as likely. We don't have a lot of detailed data yet. They've gathered different parts of data throughout the country to kind of look at. So they have, since we haven't been doing this, it's hard to have, a lot of evidence, but they do have it throughout the country a little bit here and there where they can kind of roughly estimate it is twice as likely. Reducing achievement gaps, and I'll go into that a little bit more. It reduces the time. So that's, critical for our students. If we do award them 12 units of certificate credit, could be for a fire technology student, all of a sudden this student, has 1 to 2 less semesters. Let's see, saving money, that's key for our students as well. So if we're going to reduce the amount of semesters, it's going to reduce the amount of money they spend on getting their degree. It also aligns with guided pathways. And we know that most Californians, and when we say most, we're kind of saying more than half that could benefit from CPL are people of color. So that's a real important thought for us to keep in mind as we, work towards implementing this. There's some great data that we did include some links in the PowerPoint, and we can throw them in the chat for people that can look at this who want to dig into this later. There's some great briefs that have been written, and they include some great information on, really the data that it shows how it's going to impact our students.
Yeah, I just wanted to add there, these links, these statements that we put in this slide come from these 2 papers. So that if you want to look into those to see what they say. And the next slide generally shows that last point that we got from that brief.
This is just, I think, an impactful visual. If we look at the type of student that's really going to benefit from CPL, and you're looking at, a large number of Blacks, Latinx, Asian, other. So we're really, hoping that this will positively impact their attainment of their educational goals. Maybe I'll pause there for a second. Any thoughts on this? How the data might impact our students? Everybody's quiet. They're already falling asleep. I was hoping to avoid the whole death by PowerPoint.
Okay.
All right.
Let's move on.
So what has happened? So back in 2018, just a few years ago, there was SB 1071, which really is specific to military, but it requires the college to implement consistent policy to award credit for veteran and military students using the joint service transcript. So our veterans office has been amazing. They've been doing this for years, and this law just kind of helped them. It wasn't a major change, but it did kick off so that they're doing more, which is really exciting. And they have a more consistent way of applying the credit. Then we have AB 1786, which was which is the initiative that required the California community colleges to have for students with validated, this is the CPL, that we have to expand, the credits that we're awarding for anything outside the classroom. Palomar College was awarded money to actually pilot putting together a CPL program. And while they've done this over the last 3 years, they were also not only implementing a very expansive program at Palomar, they were also required to develop resources for all of us. So any community college can access their work, and they've really done some fabulous work, all kinds of examples for us. So I've been on their website constantly, pulling from their resources. They put together a kind of like a toolkit for community colleges. So really helping with almost a step-by-step process of how they did it and how other community colleges could benefit from their working through the process. So very exciting to have those resources. Then the Title V amendments that kicked in following the initiatives. So Title V says now in section 55050 that the amendments say that the types of prior learning assessment available to students, and it has to act as a catalyst for equitable processes. That's kind of a mouthful. We do have, if anybody's interested, they want to see the actual Title V amendment. That is there for you. But in simple terms, it basically says, community colleges will offer, the different types of assessments, that I listed previously.
And I will say that kicked off fall 2020, which, as you all know, we were just still in first wave of COVID and trying to figure out how to work online. The state chancellor's office required all the community colleges in California by December of 2020, and we heard about it in August. Felicia's well aware of this, remembers, that the district had to update AR 4235 for all the language for the CPL. And then we had to also send, as a district, a plan to the state chancellors showing, where we're going to publish this on every college's website. So it was a very short amount of time that we did get it done, amazingly, through the ECPC, the kind of the district-wide curriculum group that meets. We got this done in 4 months during that period of time. Any questions? No? Okay.
I think we've put the crowd to sleep already.
Okay.
No, actually, Diane, I do have a question.
Sure.
So I work in the medical assisting one, and some of our students come in and they've been working in medical assisting and they just want to get the certificate so they can ask for either a wage increase, or sometimes certain types of clinics require a certificate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do we know what kinds of documentation they have to get from their physician or their clinic in order to say, yes, I have this type of experience, I've done this. What kind of documentation are we looking at? And how does that work when you have gotten the experience on site? How is that documented?
So we're going to touch on a little of that for what we know going forward.
Okay.
But for now, what that leads to is, if there are industry certifications that they could have received out in the workplace, we can tie those to the course. Or if there aren't, it's just like you're saying, work experience, and we'll talk about the portfolio.
Okay.
Because that might be what you're talking about. If they just had a lot of experience in an office, but not actually certifications that are, awarded by an industry, then we're looking at portfolio.
Okay.
So
all right.
hold that thought for a little bit. And We'll circle back to
Okay.
that. I guess you had
Thank
one
you.
more here, Julie. Yeah, for sure.
We had another question?
No, I have one more slide here. This is just showing the CSU is also accepting, right?
And that was really, really exciting. That just happened this last October. So October 7th. And the CSUs now have a policy out regarding credit for prior learning. And that's what you see there is just a snip of it. But basically, in a nutshell, the CSUs are required to accept credits through credit for prior learning as well.
Right. So if we give them, if we award them at Fresno City, they will accept those, is what that. I know if there's a question about the UCs, no, they're not on board yet with all of this. They have their own policies on the external exams, basically AP, I think. But no, they haven't come out with a statement like this yet at the UC that they will accept these credits.
Okay, Diane, you ready to take over?
Yes. Okay, so some of this credit for prior learning, we have already been doing on campus. And the AR 4235, that's what it was addressing. And I think it was called, I remember it, credit by examination, I think was the name of that AR. And now we just had to change it to credit for prior learning and include these new ideas, like the industry certifications and the portfolio are new. But this slide shows what we already have on campus. The first one, I'm talking about the update course articulation for AP, IB, CLEP. What that means is course-to-course articulation, that you as a discipline faculty will take that, a passing grade on one of those exams, and you will take that as a course substitution. So the student could use that course or that exam like in a major. I did update this, if you all remember, many years ago with the faculty, and there is a list in the college catalog of what you'll accept as a course-to-course equivalent from these exams. So as part of this process, we're going to need to update that and revisit that. The second one there, AB, IB, and CLEP awarded GE credit for passing scores. That was, and I didn't put the law in there because I can't remember. That was several years ago. There was a state legislation that came down that said we had to do AP. IB and CLEP, I think, are still in the works to come down. We kind of made a decision in the curriculum committee that if we're awarding AP, IB, and CLEP, we would award it as two, and mostly because Fresno State awards GE credit. That's different than course to course. And I know that gets confusing with faculty sometimes. When they come in with a passing score, like for AP, I think it's 3 or higher, they're automatically going to get credit for an area of GE. It doesn't mean they can use that course as your course in a major, for major prep, but they can get the credit for GE. We also have that in the catalog, a big table of where all these tests would count in a GE pattern. I'll stop there first. Are there any questions about the difference on those two? Okay. We do have credit by exam. We have not visited it for many, many years, but many years ago, I think the divisions, I remember doing it in social science a long time ago, said, will you accept a credit by exam? And that information was stored somewhere. So we're definitely going to expand that, revisit that. All this kind of information that we're going to gather is going to go into some central database somewhere for credit for prior learning as we institutionalize this. So we'll be asking, as faculty are going to figure out what they will accept for their course. So credit by exam will be one of those. And then like Julie said, we do have some joint service transcript credit happening. Julie, did you say it was mostly just GE credit though? Today?
Well, it's actually very, limited in terms of what there is. They get the area E, the lifelong learning credits. So that's 3 units there. But then other than that, it's pretty limited depending on, what they've completed.
So is it true then with this new legislation, we're going to start looking at course to course credit
Correct.
for military? Okay. Beyond the GE credit. Okay. Yeah. If you've been in curriculum, I mean, they get, I know physical ed, PE credit. That one, there's a few things, and it's in the catalog. You're right. There's a few things health things automatically get credit for, but we'll be expanding that. I see a question, Leanne, in the chat. Pushback for credit by exam at our college? I'm not sure about that at the college. Maybe in an area? Is that what you mean?
Well, it's been a while since I've sat in academic senate, but several years ago, I mean, I know this has been a topic discussed, and it seemed like at that particular meeting, actually, each time it came up, there was pushback about credit by exam. So I don't know if that was in certain disciplines or divisions. I don't recall that. I just remember there being pushback.
So, and make sure we understand that. So credit by exam, just so we're clear, is what I call internal exams. That's how the AR used to be, which means you actually devise an exam that can test the students' knowledge of the objectives and the content in the course. So that's given by the faculty. Where the ABIB CLEP, we call those external exams. Those are given from other agencies. So it may have been a discipline issue. We're not going to require everybody to give a credit by exam. Again, this is going to be faculty purview over what credit for prior learning you will offer for your courses. Does that make sense? So for some courses, it might make sense to do, you say, yeah, sure, I'll give a comprehensive test. And if the student can pass it, then they pass basically pass the class. And for some subjects or disciplines, that doesn't make sense, or courses.
I think Craig Polanowski had an interesting question he threw in the chat that said, in support of that thought, my understanding was that lab classes couldn't do that.
Yeah, it would be interesting how to, yeah.
So, that's going to all be up for, every faculty to be reviewing their courses, whether they have lab or no.
Yeah.
And possibly for lab classes, maybe, credit by exam could be done if we're thinking outside the box, or maybe portfolio is a better alternative for classes with a lab. So there's lots to discuss there. Definitely.
Yeah.
Good question, Craig.
We started working on, and when I say we, a lot of times I just mean Julie. She's devoting so much time. She has hours devoted to doing this for us. Started working on some process flows about how we see, students going through this process. So we have one for credit by exam. Now, this is, like I said, we already have a credit by exam process. I don't think it's done that often, but step one, the student learns about it. Student reviews eligibility with the CPL coordinator, which is kind of what Julie's doing right now. We're pushing to make it a full coordinator position, right? Students submit an application that they want to do a credit by exam. Now, this is already done. When a student wants to do credit by exam, the Office of Instruction needs to create a section, an actual section for that student, so that the faculty is paid for giving the exam. So there'll be a section created, the exam's completed, the grade is entered, and A&R awards the credit. And there's a timeline. This is in our catalog. Yeah, you've got the student submits application by the 5th week. This is in our catalog already for credit by exam. Military transcript process flow, same kind of idea. Student learns about it, reviews eligibility with our veteran counselor. We're going to have a database about, once we get this set up to what will be offered and accepted, we'll have a database for that they can check. And you can see the steps there. If a lot of these, when these course to course articulations, we'll have a database. So once it's established, the counselors can just see that it's accepted and go ahead and submit the paperwork to get the awards. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to let Julie talk to some of this. Now the new opportunity, but I'll just set it up with the new opportunities that we haven't, been doing, but that now we are required to look into how to do these for as many courses as we can. Go ahead, Julie.
So I know we're trailblazing new territory with the thought of accepting industry certifications and looking at learning portfolios. So both of those, the idea is that we'll be able to, faculty will review their courses, see if they will accept these types of assessments, and then we'll be building that database that Diane's talking about. Portfolios, that one I'm going to continue to expand on also. So the process flow for industry certification is similar to the others. The student's going to learn about CPL, and then the student will go over with the CPL coordinator, the type of background, the industry certs they have, and how does it match with a particular certificate or degree. So all of this, maybe I'll back up, is a good time to explain that, when a student wants to apply for some type of, CPL, they'll be doing a student ed plan with the CPL coordinator or a counselor, so that it is, the course-to-course articulation is going to count towards a specific certificate or degree. Okay. It's not just a random, oh, I want credit for a particular course. They're going to have to be on a certificate or degree track. So then with the industry certs, it can go kind of two ways. Now, we might have in our database, a list of specific certs that are already there that we know will count for a particular course. I'll pick on fire because I actually know we have a few fire folks, or at least one in the audience. So they might have a list already set up of very common industry certs in the fire industry. And then, so if that student came in and said, you know what, I have this particular fire cert, then the student will provide that certificate, provide the documentation, give it to the CPL coordinator. If it's a new certificate that maybe isn't on the list, then we go to that faculty and say, hey, the student came forward with this that's not on your list. Is there any way you might be able to still accept it? So that process might take place as well. And then hopefully it's approved by the faculty, and then it goes straight to A&R to award credit. Go ahead.
I saw a question in the chat from Rick. Are the counselors the only ones submitting the documents to A&R?
So
probably. See, this is why colleges that once we scale this up, and we have a large college, as y'all know, we need a CPL coordinator. We need someone who's the gatekeeper. Like I said, Julie's starting this process now, so I suppose that coordinator doesn't always have to be counseling faculty, right? But it could be. Or who is as a judge? Well, we don't have one. When will it be established? As soon as we can find the money source and get administration to follow through with that, right? It's always the issue. We are mentioning. I mention every time I can to some vice presidents that I think we're really going to need a full-time coordinator at some point. Palomar has a full-time coordinator, and they're much smaller than we are. So it's just getting that ball rolling. Does that help answer that question, you guys? Or,
and I think I also saw a similar question from a counselor, Michael Rodriguez, and that role is definitely going to have to be firmed up, because it definitely can't just be something that all of general counseling picks up either. it's going to be a specialized position, that is very well trained in reviewing transcripts and certificates and all of that.
Yeah, we definitely need this, right? It'll be too difficult to have 100 people know how to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need one person. David's here. I can't.
Hello. I just want to throw in on this topic. So I think everyone gets, I think right now, it looks like we're maybe looking at needing a gatekeeper function. And I think Diane, you just kind of mentioned that, whether it's a CPL coordinator or a certain group of counselors, in part because it's just so messy with, well, UCs won't accept it this way or that way, and these others do accept it. Even with AP, we find this. I mean, technically a student can take their AP score report to admissions and records and get AP credit applied. But gosh, especially in the UC system, it's just so variable. What will work or what won't work for you. So it's just really good that students at least meet with somebody that's kind of knowledgeable in the limits of this credit beyond our system, not just even within our system. So, it's kind of fluid right now on who submits what credit to where, but I think the goal is to maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, to kind of at least have some kind of gatekeeping function, just so that students don't get awarded credit that kind of shoots them in the foot later on, or vice versa. They don't get credit. They should have. Yeah.
Thanks, David. Yeah, David and Cleisha are here, and they've been really instrumental in our little work group that we started last year. We have a mention of it on another slide. We've really, before Julie came on, there are a few of us that are really trying to figure out how to do. I mean, this is a big project, how to do this, and having the time to be able to do this. But yeah, I agree. So we have these CPL already with, credit by exam and the AP stuff. But I think with adding all of it now and scaling it up, we definitely need a more centralized process for sure. And like you said, the information being a little more centralized.
Good. Any more questions on industry search before we move on? We do want to show you a quick example.
Oh yeah. And I'll say for, the academic faculty here that teach like I do in economics, that it's more GE or that kind. These are more prevalent, these industry certs, probably in CTE kind of things, right? Fire's one, a lot in applied tech. Craig's here, graphics probably, right? Some other computer certificates that are out there.
Good. So this is just an example I picked on business. Lori Swain had provided this example. It is just an example. Nothing is in stone, of a crosswalk that she put together on some CIT courses. And then what's in yellow are some common industry certs that could match with our particular courses. So this would be an example of an industry cert crosswalk for a specific discipline.
And I'll reiterate, this is going to be faculty purview. This whole credit for prior learning, the reason it got taken up under the curriculum committee is this is a 10+1 and a curriculum issue. So the people who are going to make the decisions whether these certificates apply or not are going to be a faculty in coordination with the counseling and CPL. Okay, next one.
All right, so we're going to move on to portfolio. So I love flowcharts. So again, portfolio will work similar to the others, but obviously there's more work involved in terms of a student preparing a portfolio. So students going to review, with the CPL coordinator, the course, their background. So there's going to be kind of that preliminary interview that goes on to see if, this is a match for the student. And then definitely making sure that this particular course is approved by the faculty, ahead of time. for that particular assessment. And then this is an area we still need to work through and figuring out, how much support we provide the student in terms of preparing the portfolio. So that's where I'm going to be welcoming faculty feedback, and how as a campus we want to do that. So we'll talk more about that later. So once a student commits and they say, I'm going to submit a portfolio, then again, the Office of Instruction creates a course section for that class. And then the portfolio is submitted similar to, the student taking a credit by exam. The timing will be very similar. Then there's a grade. Most portfolio campuses do a pass, no pass from the research I've looked into. And then once that's done, then A&R awards a credit. Anything new that popped up that surprised anybody? No. Okay, we'll keep moving.
Yeah, I'll explain the portfolios a little bit.
Portfolios. So a learning portfolio is more than what people, I think, even when I saw it, when I saw the word portfolio, I thought, oh, wow, are you talking like an art portfolio? No, it's really what's considered a learning portfolio. And it's a package. It really is a package of materials, that are going to highlight the student's knowledge and experience. And the material, there's a lot of materials that go into it. And it's not just a pretty package. There's going to be, line item to correlate the contents of the portfolio with, the learning outcomes of the course. So we're going to make that very concrete. And then for that one, it requires faculty to first decide that their course is going to accept portfolio. And then the faculty will create a rubric that will evaluate the student's portfolio. So just to give you a little bit of a visual on what might be included in a portfolio. And this is just a draft. It can be everything from, an introduction. So the student kind of explains a little bit about their experience, why they're, applying for credit through a portfolio, a little narrative of their background, again, aligned with a learning outcome. It may include a resume, so that outlines, a resume done with the course in mind. So not just maybe your common resume where they're applying for a certain job. It's going to be a resume designed for showcasing a student's background that aligns with this particular course learning outcomes. Other types of supporting documents could be letters of recommendation, different certificates obtained, on the job, the student's job description, and maybe samples of their work.
Are there any questions? Well, I will say, we don't have the full process yet of how to do this. We're getting there. We would love input as you think, today or in the future, of how to support faculty in deciding, or the process of how they're going to determine what they want to see in a portfolio, plus the rubric the grading rubric that needs to go with that. And like Julie mentioned, possibly a process for how to help students put it together. We're still kind of in the brainstorming, thinking about it stage.
So it sounds to me like when a student decides that they want to do this, like with a portfolio, that they would need to have an instructor be like a mentor or almost like when you're doing an advanced degree and you have an instructor that's working with you and making sure that you have everything you need for your papers and your documentation to defend your thesis or whatever. It sounds almost along the lines of that.
Well, that's what we've been talking about. And as as faculty tell us that they want to do a portfolio, we don't even know how many of that's going to be, how many there will be yet. We need to help that if you go to that workflow, course section created for student, this is to pay the faculty for assessing the portfolio. That's kind of like the credit by exam. So we can have that, but who's going to help the student develop it? Because I think, we're still brainstorming, I think, Julie, if a faculty says, I will accept a portfolio, then not only do we have that stored in our database that they will accept it, we probably need what the portfolio should have in it.
I was going to say, there would have to be almost like a
instruction.
And a standardization about, yes, we'll accept this and we'll accept this and we'll accept this, and it has to show this and this and this.
Right. And that might be slightly different for different disciplines, right?
Right. Exactly.
What you need, what you need might be different than, what somebody else needs. So I think all of that groundwork needs to be done ahead of time.
Yeah.
Faculty have to do that kind of work on, okay, this is what I will accept in my portfolio. And if it's clear enough, maybe students can just assemble that. They don't need the mentorship, on their own.
Yeah.
And then you would get paid through this course section for actually assessing it based on your rubric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're thinking, but we haven't done it before.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
So we definitely, encourage the help, feedback, ideas. Tammy. Hi, Tammy. Can't see you, but I can just see your names pop up.
You might look at 2 entities for a portfolio. I know if a student takes an AP art class, which I know is a high school system, but they have to submit a portfolio at the end of it that somebody reviews. So you might look at what's required. And I know that would be art related, but you could still see what type of information. And then I know the architecture program, there's a school down south, I don't know which one, that will accept a portfolio from our program to see if they get credit for certain classes down there. And I don't know what school it is, but the architecture program would know. So they deal with the portfolio process a lot.
Good. Thank you, Tammy.
And then I do have a question just in general. So is the idea of this stuff to replace essentially like the waiver form? Because I will deal with military students who fill out a waiver form showing that they have the safety experience to waive a safety class that's required in most of our division. So will this process then eliminate the need for that waiver form?
Well, you're talking about prerequisite waiver, right?
Yes.
It's not,
Or are you talking
no, not prerequisite.
Course waiver? You're talking
a course waiver. Yes, a course waiver. So there's a course waiver that basically says I don't need to take this class because I've already essentially taken it via the military. But the problem with the course waiver is if the degree, let's say the certificate requires 16 units.
Right.
And they're waiving a 2-unit class, they have to pick up 2 units elsewhere.
Right.
Good point. So this would solve that problem, right, Julie?
And that is definitely the idea, Tammy, because we don't want to approve waivers. That's been kind of the movement of the campus, and that this definitely could replace for most situations. It's never across the board, but could be an ideal solution for many of those course waivers.
Yeah. And then they would get those units too.
Well, so then I have a question. If they're going to receive those units, does that mean they have to pay for those units? Because a lot of times they'll say, look, I have all this knowledge and I would like the certificate, but I can't afford to pay for the program.
That's a great question. Because as being part of the curriculum for so long, and I was involved in revising AR 4235 years ago, we had a long debate over credit by exam because Title V says that we can either charge a fee for credit by exam or the unit price, if it's a 3-unit class. And I guess part of that's to, pay the faculty for assessing the credit by exam. So that's in the AR. That's a good point about like portfolio. Are we going to have, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
I can tell you at FCC, if they do credit by exam, the student pays a fee and they pay for the class because they have to register for the class, then go pay a fee. So they get double whammy.
So actually, I'll raise
Go
a hand on that one. That was recently eliminated, just very recently, Tammy, that
Okay.
extra fee
Good.
because of some of the legislation updates.
This was the debate years ago with AR 4235, because we found at that time we just had the 3 colleges, Reedley, Clovis, and us, and we found that we were all doing it differently. And so we dug into Title V to see that it's very unclear in the language if it's an either or. Either they pay this or they pay that. It's very vague. So that's interesting.
My concern is, again, if we are focusing on student equity, we're trying to make our education as available as possible to as many people as possible, then making them pay for a class that they're not attending class. They're simply saying, I already have this knowledge. I need the certificate. To me, that seems like you're going against equity. I mean, I agree that there needs to be some kind of payment but maybe not the full payment for the full class because they're not actually taking the class. Does that concern resonate with you, the equity issue there?
Yes. And I think this is something that we're going to need to address with the district because it needs to be the same. I think there's going to need to be some fee because we need to compensate faculty for assessing. The industry certifications, no, once you tell us, like that CIT example, once you tell us that cert matches that, we don't need to, faculty doesn't need to do anything else unless they want to update it. So that just goes through A&R. Same with the AP, IB, CLEP, and things like that. But the credit by exam and the portfolio, the faculty need time to assess it and grade it, and you want to be paid for that. So I don't know if the district, are we saying let's not charge a fee at all, right? For equity?
No, I'm saying that there probably should be a fee, especially if you're going to have to review a portfolio or something like that. But I don't think it should be the entire cost of the class because you're not taking up that much of the instructor's
I agree.
time.
I would love to just see a flat fee, right?
I would too. I think that would be much more equitable because the student has already put in all that time and effort. And sometimes in the industry, the student still has to pay to take those classes within the industry, maybe not at the college, but within the industry. And so they've already paid that.
Yeah.
And so then to have to come to the school and say, well, I want this degree. I can show you that I have these skills already. So why take this class? They can show you that they have those skills, and then why pay for it twice?
Yeah, I agree. And this is going to be, we're going to have to take this up at the district somehow, I think.
It definitely will be a district level decision. And
it's a budget.
Well, it doesn't have to be because all the colleges have been doing things differently for credit by exam for decades, but we should make it a decision on this. And I would agree.
It's not a budgetary issue, at least at the college level.
No.
I mean, if you're providing free services or partial payment for services.
I believe, if we create a section for the class, that may trigger something different that triggers enrollment. And then
the Office of Instruction has that section for CBE, credit by exam, already coded because it happens every once in a while. And when they create a section for it, the payment to the faculty is already, I don't remember what it is. I don't know if it's a flat fee or something. It's not.
$15.
That's it?
Yep. I know, because I get credit by exam a lot. And the section they create is not created until the end of the semester, actually.
Oh, that's
Because
right.
In credit by exam, the student registers for the class and they have the option of attending or not. But you can't give them the exam until we get an email. There's a timeline
Okay.
for it's like week 10. And then the section is created right before the end of the semester for inputting a grade only. Because credit by exam, they get whatever grade they get on the exam is the grade that goes on the transcript.
Tammy, you answered a question. Julie and I were like, I don't know
Yeah.
the answer to that. I am so glad you guys, all of you are here from these departments that know this. We need more of these kinds of sessions for us to learn this. We're like, do they get the grade or is it pass, no pass? So for credit by exam, they actually get a grade, huh?
They do whatever grade they get on the exam, which means if they fail the exam, they get an F on their transcript.
But if they get a B, they get a B.
Right. And
Gotcha.
so the section is created right at the end for inputting that grade. The benefit of a credit by exam for a student, the only benefit is that they don't actually have to attend the class,
Mhm.
right? So, I mean, not a lot of students.
That's huge for our working students. You know,
It is, except for they end up having to pay the fee and pay for the class. And that kind of, it's a
Yeah.
double whammy as far as how it
That-
goes now.
That shouldn't be there, especially if they're paying the faculty $15 to assess it.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
we get $15.
Yeah. So
So I
this
do-
needs to be addressed. Yeah.
Yeah, I do know we eliminated that extra fee, so they're not getting double dinged.
But they are paying like the 3 units or the 2 units price.
Correct.
Right.
Which I
Which is-
guess if, with the community college system being first 2 years free, some students wouldn't necessarily now be actually paying for it, but
It's not free.
it's not an ideal system.
I don't think it's free yet, first 2 years.
Okay, good info,
But-
good questions, good comments.
Yay.
Let's get us moving so we get through
Okay.
this. We want to
Next one.
be respectful of your time.
Oh, we did that. Oh, yeah, we did that. Oh, so you had a nice little example here.
And we've kind of already talked about an example like this.
Yeah.
I know fire is really anxious, to be getting some of the industry certs and portfolio type things implemented. And I worked with a student really recently. This is a real student who, has been working for, City of Fresno as a firefighter for over 10 years. And he doesn't have a degree, and they now have to have certain levels of education to get promoted. So he would have been a perfect, student example that could have benefited from a possible portfolio. And I had talked to him about credit by exam, and that, honestly intimidated him because, our courses, have very specific, a final exam or a midterm might be targeting some very specific information. And, he was a little nervous about actually taking an exam like that and possibly putting together everything he had from his work, his experience, a resume, the certs he already obtained. It could have been, ideal for portfolio instead of credit by exam.
Yeah.
What did Rick say? We've been telling they have to pay. What did you say, Rick?
Pay for the units, is that correct?
They have to pay for the
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, right?
Mhm,
For credit by exam.
mhm.
Yeah,
Not for industry certs, though.
no. Right. So I think this is a good topic we need to bring up somewhere.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
Figure that
All
out.
right.
Okay, there's an example of a rubric or a generic kind of rubric from Palomar.
Mhm.
So I don't think we need to go through that in detail.
No. Okay.
All right, progress to date. I'll do this. As I talked about, so I was going to attempt to, if it's still in line. I think this is the AR, if you wanted to see the new AR, there, in the chat. We updated that AR 4235 just by December 2020. So I started a work group in spring 21, the next semester. I knew we need to get started through the Curriculum Committee. David Shoemaker, who's here, he's been leading that. Really appreciated that. Kalisha was on it, a few other members. I don't know if you're, because I can't see you all. I don't know if you're here. started working on what should we do first? Because there's so much. And then Julie came on board, and David smartly got her assigned as a part-time credit for prior learning lead that fall. She's been doing all this kind of research in the Chancellor's office and from Palomar College. We did do a shorter presentation of this at Academic Senate a few months ago. And we've been trying to create these process flows and the curriculum process for this, and creating the administrative flows, as you've seen. Oops. Make sure I didn't blow that here. I did. Okay, faculty role. So we need to start this spring, getting some faculty involved. We'll do some more of this kind of presentation, or maybe some other kind of collaborative presentations, professional development. Try to get some early adopters, like we've mentioned FIRE. They are definitely going an early adopter because they already have certificates they can use. They just need this process to be able to use it. So maybe we'll start with the low-hanging fruit and try to get some early adopters to submit these eligibility forms. This is what we imagine. Faculty completes this form that we've kind of got a draft I'll show you. Some approvals, we complete these crosswalks. I think we have a slide of a more involved crosswalk. And then we update course outliner record and a credit for prior learning database, and then the website. And then we're thinking that these kinds of options on courses would be reevaluated during the curriculum review cycle. I think Julie and David or something, you guys started working on this, making a form to see, for each course, what credit for prior learning options the faculty will accept. So that's what we're kind of starting to look at that. We'd like to roll some of this out, we hope, this spring, at least for ones that are kind of ready to go. Here's a sample, more expanded crosswalk about, here's the course, and what it would accept for credit for prior learning. Any questions on that? We have plenty of time. So our next steps, is to finalize these processes, not only the student one, but also the faculty one. Finalize the A&R procedures and what goes on the transcripts, and that's a district issue. And create these databases and the website information. Maybe we can pilot next semester, accepting some of these certificates or portfolios. And then we have to continue to scale up and get this institutionalized. So I think that's it on the slides. We would love to hear any more questions, feedback.
Well, I just want to say, I think this is really important for us to be doing, simply because I think that after taking RAMREL and really starting to think about equity for our students, I think it's really important that we give credit to those students who have been working and have so much knowledge and have so much experience, but don't have the college degree because either they've been working or they've never been to college, but they have everything they need to get that degree to then make a better living, make a better wage. And I think that this is really important in terms of helping our community and really fostering equity.
Thank
Excellent.
you, Elizabeth. You've really hit it on the nose and what it's about. And I see you as being an early adopter.
Yeah, and Tammy too, anything in applied tech who want to help us, because you are positioned to have these kinds of industry certifications or opportunities for portfolios.
Well, I'm really interested in this, so I'll be emailing you.
Yay.
Good, I love it.
Yes. Any other questions or thoughts?
Looks like David's trying to speak up. Go for it.
I was just clapping my hands for Elizabeth. I was thinking, yeah, she sounds like an early adopter, and that's great. Especially it's exciting in that portfolio because that's the most nebulous one, but to potentially have a real discipline to work with in fleshing out that process could be so helpful. And I might throw out too, Diane had it on one of those steps we need to do about the website, because I think that's partly some of my responsibility. Because really, we discovered through this whole process, even just looking at what we currently have, there's two needs. One, we got to provide information to students, but also we got to provide information to our faculty, because I mean, it's like this, how much do you earn doing CBE? How do you do this? How do you do that? I mean, there's just so much, some of the information was just so hard to find and gather.
Yeah.
So really, I think that's something we definitely see as an important piece is how do we communicate this to our faculty and staff folks so people know how it works and what to do. So we will be working on that.
Yeah. And we appreciate this feedback because we do get to put places. Julie and I talk a lot, and David and Kalisha and I, we talk a lot. We're like, I don't know, what do we do now? What's next? What part do we go with next? Because there is so much to this between expanding what we're already doing and making that clear, and then adding these new parts to it. And then like, yes, Dave, you can do the website. You can take that on if you like. You can have as much of that as you want.
I think Stephanie Harris had a great question, just wondering, what it's going to look like when students do a portfolio or an industry cert, what's going to look like on their transcripts. And we are working through that right now.
Well, I do know there's MIS codes by the state chancellor's office, right? But you're right. You guys are more familiar, the counselors, with what a transcript looks like than I hardly ever see one, right?
I'll throw in on this one. Just in some of the discussions with Myrna, it's not 100% certain, and of course, some of it too. We gotta, the Death Star. We gotta wait on what the district's going to do because they're district transcripts. But some initial thought is like industry certs might show up at the top of the transcript, possibly like we do military credit or AP. And then, but the portfolio, since it looks like we're going to require having a section built, that actually might end up being more like CBE with a course actually in the semester with a number code identifying it as a portfolio. That's kind of some initial thought, but I mean, it could change.
Yeah.
It probably is too soon to know for sure. Because again, it's a district decision, right? So
I like Rico's question. Is there a limit on how many credit by, do you mean credit for prior learning a student can do, or credit by exam? You just clarify that, Rico. Do you just mean credit by exam?
No, for the whole portfolio, everything, like
credit.
Everything on that.
Did the AR, when I look at the AR, I can't remember.
The AR does not include a limit. So that could be something we could put in place. But right now, I think it's open.
I know we talked about it. I don't think there's a limit, but they still have to meet residency. That part I do remember, which in residency is 12 units at Fresno City College. Yeah, because I do remember this conversation now with the AR. But we didn't put a limit on how many CPL units they could do above that.
So like if a person has 4 or 5 different portfolios that they qualify for multiple different classes, that may push them to get 3 or 4 different degrees. And I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say if that's fair or anything, but that could, I don't know where that would fall into as far as.
Well, I think in the discussion, like Elizabeth's been saying, in terms of equity, that's okay. I don't know about degrees, but I think we have a lot of certificates in your area, especially in applied tech, that they might be able to get, right?
Yes.
They do have to meet the 12 units of residency, though. That means they have to take 12 units on campus. That's not CPL.
Okay. I was just thinking of that because like, as far as my personal thing, I have certifications or industry certifications and other areas, and I'd like to just go apply for all those and get all those college credits also for that, and help me here as an instructor. But I just was thinking as anyone else, I don't want to make it feel like, oh, I can double dip and help me out, but
Mhm.
that's just a game that others can play or something.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's part of the way we view it is if they have the knowledge, they have the knowledge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they have to pass these certificates or these credit by exams, or the portfolio is going to be assessed.
Yeah.
So,
And putting together the portfolios is going to be a big, big job. They're not just, one piece of paper and done. So they're
Yeah,
quite a
that's
bit of
true.
work.
That's
Mhm.
true.
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we do feel as we move forward this semester, right, David and Julie, we may need some professional development for faculty on creating portfolio. We definitely think we need to dig into helping with that.
That is one of the moving forward. Professional development has already asked that we continue doing like monthly workshops on, CPL in general, or it could be, we could have 1 month, it could be specifically on portfolios, or one could be, credit by exams. So hopefully we'll be getting that off and running this semester as well.
Any other questions? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all once.
Nice.
Even if it's just your little black box, it's better. Anything else? Feel free to email us with any ideas or questions, or if you want to help, if you want to get started. That would be great. Do you need to sign in? No, I think your registration into this, it gets documented everywhere into the deans, if that helps. We're good there. Anything else? Well, thank you so much for attending. This is a very nice, large group with lots of information that you had to share. And we look forward to working with you some more.
And you'll be hearing more about it on campus. So you are the early birds.
Yeah.
Getting you're really the first group. We have presented to Academic Senate. Curriculum Committee knows a little bit about it, Academic Senate, and then you're the first group of faculty. So we really
Yes.
appreciate you attending.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. We'll
All
see you
right.
soon.
Email us with any questions. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Diane.
Uh-huh. Thank you.